This is Hatton Littman, the Communications Director, speaking again. Just a heads up to everybody that's just joining. We are recording this session. This is our Superintendent's Town Hall. We've got a little over 60 guests. Looks like we're up to 65. I'll keep admitting new guests. If anybody's having any trouble, you can feel free to message the Missoula County Public Schools account in the chat. I'm keeping everybody on mute at this point, and at the point that the superintendent asks for dialogue and feedback, you'll be able to unmute yourself. So with that, I will pass it off to Rob to get us started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Rob Watson, and I'm the Superintendent of Schools for Missoula County Public Schools. I have just a few things that I'd like to cover today, and then after I do so, I want to be sure to open it up for questions or comments or feedback for me. This is scheduled to last just an hour today, so thank you for being here and your participation. Normally, if the group size were small enough, we would go around and do a roll call and figure out which school you're from, but unfortunately with 72 people, that would take most of the hour. So I'm going to skip that. However, though, I would ask that if you're going to participate through a comment or a question, if you'd please identify yourself and tell me which school you're associated with, that would help me. Let's see. Before I start today, I do want to just call everybody's attention to our our district statement regarding equity, equal access to education, and non-discrimination. So in order to do that, I'm going to try to share my screen, and I apologize. This is the first time I've done this on Zoom. So hopefully this works. And I think Hatton has to give me permission to share.
Yep, I'm working on that right now. Okay, you're a co-host now, so you should be able to hit share.
All right, let me give this a shot. Let's see, how about that one? All right, can everybody see my screen? It should be showing the district front page of our website. I see if some nods of yes. Hatton, can you see that?
Yep, I sure can. And I've got a couple people in the chat who can see it too.
Thank you. So as you can imagine, what I've heard in our community is not much different than what we've seen on the news and or talking with with our friends and family. We've obviously all experienced some very traumatic events, some very frustrating events, some things that obviously cause us anger when we see folks that are treated with discrimination and or extreme violence, based on color of their skin and or perceptions of who they are. And so it's concerning for all of us. And I just want to, before we started our meeting today, I just felt it was really important to point out our commitment as a school district and make sure that folks understand sort of what we are committed to in our district. The way I'm going to do that is just draw your attention to a particular district commitment that we have in place. And this is nothing new. This commitment has been in place for a long time. And it's actually found in one of our district policies, policy 3210, which is our equal access policy, what I call our equal access non-discrimination policy. And to that end, we as a school district are committed to making sure that all of our students, regardless of race, color, origin, sex, religion, you can see the list there in that policy: gender identity, gender nonconformity, actual or potential marital parental status. Regardless of any of those things, we are committed to providing an equal access to our rich educational opportunities that we have available in all of our schools. And because this commitment exists in policy and as a student right, we are responsible to make sure that we remove any barriers that might be in place that do not provide equal access to educational opportunities. So if there are barriers related to discrimination or racism, it's our not only our board policy, but it's our, as educators, it's our responsibility to make sure that we remove those barriers so that that all of our kids, regardless of any of these circumstances, have equal access and opportunity to our rich educational um, opportunities exist in all of our schools. So that's a commitment, and it is a goal. But I can tell you that there are times when even I believe as a superintendent, we need to do a better job in trying to reach that goal. I am committed as an educator. I've always been committed to providing those opportunities for my students, regardless of their background or circumstances or the color of their skin. It's always been my goal as an educator. I think I share that with our educators as well. But when we look at that commitment, one of the things that we really have to consider is, are we doing the best that we can to remove those barriers for equity within our district? So what we have to do and what we have to continue to do is ask that question: what are the barriers? And we can find the barriers through looking at our district data, trying to figure out, where the gaps are between different populations. We can also examine barriers by talking and listening to our students and our families that may be not experiencing that equal access, and we need to figure out why that is. So I'm beyond this commitment that's in policy. I'm also committed as a school district that it is our responsibility to listen to our community and learn from their experiences in our district, and try to decide where those barriers exist and what we can do as a district to remove those barriers. So I think having a policy is only one step. I think the next really important step, but probably the harder step, is to have those tough conversations with our community and figure out, are we doing everything we can to provide equal access? And if we're not, what are we prepared to do as a school district and as a community to change that? So I don't have all the answers. I know that. I learned that a long time ago as an educator. And what I believe has been my primary goal in my career is making sure that I'm continually learning and listening, because I think I have a lot to learn with regards to race and racism and bigotry and those sorts of things. So I continue to learn and listen and talk to folks who know from lived experience, know these issues much better than I do. And the last thing I would just say is that this commitment doesn't just end this week, or just because we're seeing some protesting. I mean, this is really a commitment that we have to continue throughout the school year, and we've done some great work in this area, but we need to continue to do more. And one piece that I found really powerful this last year is a training that we held for. It was a pilot training where we had 90 staff members in attendance, and we talked about some of those hidden ways that we all contribute to racism and or discrimination, and sometimes we don't realize we're doing it as educators. And so just hearing that and being aware of that and understanding how our actions are perceived or received from our students is critically important. So we have lots more to do in this area. We need to get better, and we will continue to do so. But I do want you to know, as parents, that we have this commitment in board policy, this equal access commitment, and it's my responsibility as an educator to make sure that we follow that. So with that, I think I'll pause on that piece, but I thought it would be really important to start our discussion today just recognizing that there's a lot of frustration and a lot of hurt not only nationally, but even in our own community. And we have to listen to that and learn from that as best as we can. So thanks for that. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so I can check my list to see if there's any other things I wanted to say on that topic. We will get to, just so you're aware what's on my list, we will get to probably the largest discussion point, and that's sort of the restart for the school year, what that might look like. And we'll cover that last, just to give you all some time to ask questions. I do want to cover a couple of other things, though, that are not necessarily related directly to that, but are important. They are important for our district. And so I'm going to breeze through just a couple of other items. And by all means, if you have questions, we'll give you a chance to ask when I'm done with these few items. So one of the things I wanted to talk with you about is my desire to change and improve a couple of things in our district. Number one is the high school transfer policy. So if you have a high school student or a student soon to be a high school student, you probably know all about our transfer policy. It seemed to be the topic of discussion when I got here in Missoula last August. It seemed to be one of the first things I heard about regarding concerns and frustrations around our transfer policy. And basically what it boils down to, after talking to a lot of people across the community over the year, what it really boils down to is there's just a lot of frustration because our process does not seem very transparent, and students are transferring between high schools without really any deadlines or timelines, and sometimes they transfer at very awkward times during the year. Sometimes we have students that enter high school for what they thought was one reason, and then they change their minds and they transfer in the middle of their 9th grade year, which creates other problems. What's very interesting about our 3 high schools is that our 3 high schools are, while they offer the same basic education programs, they are a lot different in some of their electives and some of the academic programs that they do offer. And I don't think we're ever going to get away from that. I think we'll always have some differences in our 3 high schools. And for that reason alone, I think we do need to have a transfer policy. We need to, I'm not saying that we would never allow a transfer, because I think we're always going to allow transfers, but we just need to set some guidelines and some deadlines and some reasons around why we would allow transfers. Because right now there's really just a lot of unknowns with the process. And I get a lot of questions from parents, well, I didn't know I could do that, or I didn't realize that transfer option was available, or some students are really abusing the transfer option and going back and forth between lots of different schools, which creates other problems. So my goal in opening this discussion, and the first thing we'll do is open the discussion with our school board this evening, is to really just shed some light on what I believe the issues are, and then also talk about how we can solve some of those issues by putting some procedures in place, procedures that are clear and understandable for everyone and transparent, so that when a parent or a student decides, yeah, I want to look at a school that's outside my area, that they understand what the process is and they understand when is the time to do that. So I just wanted to mention that because that's likely to be a pretty big discussion this summer. And I wanted you all to be aware, because that'll be a big change for our district. Again, not saying that we wouldn't allow transfers or out of area enrollment, but we just need to have some parameters around that. So that was one of the things I wanted to share. Another thing that I wanted to share with you all was an organizational structure that we've been working on in the district for a little bit. And let me just see if I can find it fairly quickly in my files here, and then I'll share my screen. So as you're probably aware, we've had some ebbs and flows in the way our district administration is organized. And what we've noticed is that there's some good things and bad things about any organizational chart. Let me see if I can share this with you so that you can see it. I can blow it up just a little bit. Okay, so what's what's interesting is we have several folks in the central office building that are responsible for all the operations of the district. And what we've gone to for our new chart is some streamlining of jobs and assignments and responsibilities. So we've created an assistant superintendent position, and we haven't had that for a number of years. What we had for the last 10 years or so was regional directors that were in charge of certain programs in our district, but we didn't have one central person that sort of managed the academic side of the district. So that's what I wanted to do, is create an assistant superintendent position. This is a cost neutral change. What we try to do is save money in other positions and move other positions around in order to create a cost neutral change in our organizational chart. But you can kind of see it over here. One of the things we're doing is having all the principals report to one person. So I think that's critical for our principals, obviously. They'll be supervised and evaluated by the assistant superintendent. And then obviously if a parent has questions, comments, or concerns about a school or a principal, then there's one person that they can talk to regarding that as well. So, and then there's other things that are underneath the assistant superintendent, like special education director, curriculum director, federal programs director. So these are similar positions that we've had in the past. Again, not trying to create all new positions, but trying to stay budget neutral. The other one that I wanted to point out is our arts education director. In the past, we have called that by a different name. I think we called it the fine arts supervisor, but we've changed that position a little bit because I want to make sure that it's meeting the needs of our district in terms of all the things related to arts education. So not only just music and performing arts, but also visual arts. And so arts education director just seemed to be more inclusive for that position. So those are just a few changes that you'll likely hear about in the next few months. We're moving to this organizational structure as of July 1st. The assistant superintendent has been hired. His name is Russ Lodge. And Russ used to work in our district many years ago. He was the principal at Russell Elementary for quite a few years. And he was also a principal at Hellgate High School for a few years. So Russ is coming back and will be serving in that assistant superintendent role. Okay, and then the last thing, as far as just district updates that I wanted to make sure you were all aware about, is some of the technology shifts that we'll be experiencing over the next few months and actually the next few years. So one of the things that we wanted to do this fall is we wanted to sort of transition away from Q. And for those of you that know, Q is our student information system. And depending on what grade your student is, you probably have more experience or less experience with Q. But Q is our student information system. And we, for a variety of really good reasons, we wanted to move away from Q. As you probably experienced in your own businesses or jobs, you know, there's always changes in technology and changes in software. And Q has sort of outlived its efficiency with our district. So last spring, we investigated and we picked a different program, and the program is called Infinite Campus. And Infinite Campus is used by some of our surrounding districts. I think maybe Hellgate Elementary or Target Range. I can't remember which one uses Infinite Campus. But we believe that Infinite Campus really is our future in the district. We were prepared to roll over and start Infinite Campus when school started next fall. But with all the changes we've had this spring, it was just really hard for us to make that switch. So we've got one more year with Q, and then we'll develop a plan to transition to Infinite Campus in the fall of 2021. So that's one big change that you won't see next year, but it'll be the following year. The other bigger change that is a change for us, but as a parent, you may not see a whole lot of difference, but if any of you have ever emailed us, emailed myself or emailed a teacher, you'll likely know that our email address is quite lengthy, and It's our own private domain, mcps.k12.mt.us. While that works for us, we actually made the transition to Google quite a few years ago. And what we've never done is really turned on our Google email. And so what we're going to do over the summer and encourage our staff to do is make that transition to Google for a couple of different reasons. As you probably witnessed during the remote learning program, I mean, a lot of our teachers are now using Google Classroom, and they're asking students to turn stuff in on Google Docs. And so the Google platform really seems to be our future. And so it made sense for us to move our email that direction as well. So for example, my email is rwatson@mcps.k12.mt.us. That's not going to change a whole lot. It's just going to get shorter. It's going to be rwatson@mcpsmt.org. So we will make sure parents get all of that information, but I think you will see some changes with our teachers migrating to Google. I think things will be a lot more seamless for us in our work, and I'm really excited to make that shift. There will be some growing pains every time you make a technology shift. There are some frustrations, but we believe this is the right way to go with transferring our email over to Google. So that's the big stuff for just kind of some updates. The last item I wanted to discuss, and then just give you a chance to ask any questions or provide any comments for me. The other item that's obviously been something that we've really been discussing a lot the last few weeks and months is really our return to school plan. And we'll be sharing some of this with our school board tonight to get their feedback. And then we'll be sending an email out to all parents probably later this week with some more information about our return to school plan. So before I launch into that, what I would like to tell you is that we've had quite a few teams working on this. It hasn't just been myself or just a handful of people working on this. We've had a lot of teams working on this process. We've looked across the country at other districts and kind of seen what they're doing in their return to school plans. We've looked at guidance from the CDC and the governor's office and the local health department with regards to what some of the expectations might be in our return to school plan. So I don't want to go through all of it with you, but I do want to hit some of the highlights because I think some of this is critical information that parents understand. I would say, first of all, none of what we expect is going to look the same. It'll probably look quite a bit different than it has in the past, just based on what we know about COVID-19 and how it's transmitted and some of the guidance that we've received from the CDC. So we have some caveats that we'll try to be responsive to the changes in COVID-19. As you all know, as the weeks went on and things changed and we moved from phase 1 to phase 2, then some of our practices and guidance changed. And so we will still continue to do that this summer. And so what we'll provide for you this week is really just our best guess of what we think it might look like, but obviously things will change over the summer. And so we really ask for a lot of flexibility from you all as parents and your students as we move forward. A couple of things that I think is probably important for all parents to understand. When we come back, what we've been told is that we should really try to have smaller groups of students in the building at one time. And that's for social distancing purposes. If you've been in any of our classrooms, you know that some of our classrooms are not huge. And when you talk about 20 kindergarten students, I mean, the thought of trying to keep them socially distanced is really difficult, even with multiple adults in the room. So what we've been encouraged to do by some of the plans we've looked at and from the CDC is to try to open at a smaller percentage, like open at 25% or open at 50% capacity. Having said that, we understand that that's really difficult for parents. I mean, if we only have 50% of our students there on one day and 50% of our students there on the next day, then the question is going to be, well, what happens on those opposite days with children in our community? And so we're trying to balance all that. And that's probably one of the hardest things that we've had to wrap our minds around, is like, what does this look like in the fall if it's recommended that we only have 50% of our kids in the building? And we don't have any good answers for that. I did talk with some community partners the other day about how can we problem solve that, so that if, you know, if for one of the days, if there's only 50% of the kids at school, what could we plan for the other 50% with some of our community partners, so we have a place for those kids to go? And no good answers yet, but we'll keep working on that. The other one that's fairly costly, we believe, and it's going to be kind of hard for us to do, but we'll figure it out, is the busing situation. The other thing that they're recommending is for school buses that we only have, you know, fewer kids on the bus so that they can socially distance. So what that will probably look like is multiple runs of the same bus. So the bus would pick up a certain group of students at one time, and then it might come a little bit later to pick up another group of students. Obviously, we're going to use as many buses as we can get a hold of and use all the bus drivers, but it may take more than just one pickup to get all the students to school in that scenario. We also have some ideas of what school might look like once students get there. So right now, the health department is encouraging us to screen students as they enter the building. And obviously that is a temperature screen, and then maybe some other health screening as students enter the building. During the school day, trying to limit movement as much as possible. So, you know, maybe not going to the cafeteria for lunch, but eating lunch in the classroom. Still allowing kids to go out for recess, but in smaller groups. Trying to get to reduce the number of groups that students are interacting with. So staying with their same group most of the day is another recommendation. But they're really trying to make sure we limit the student movement during the day and the student mixing of groups. And then, of course, bringing back those things we were trying to practice in March, like frequent hand washing and frequent cleaning of our surfaces that are touched throughout the day. So those things will obviously be a piece of it as well. What you'll likely won't see in the fall are any large group activities like school assemblies or dances, or any other large group activities that we traditionally have in school, like concerts. We may not be able to do those until some of the other restrictions are lifted. So that's a couple of things about what it might look like. We will be asking students to bring their own cotton mask. For those kids that cannot bring one, we'd obviously supply one, a disposable one, but we won't have very many of those. So we're hoping kids can bring their own mask. And then the other issue, related issue, is just obviously social distancing in the classroom as much as possible. And then, you know, same things we've said before, keeping kids home when they're sick. We'll be doing health screenings. So if a kid appears to be sick during the day, we might be sending kids home. The other thing that's yet to be determined, but we're sort of awaiting guidance from the health department, is if there is a positive case in a school setting, what we would do then. And likely what we would do is we would shut the school down for a short period of time, so that the health department can do some tracing of the close contacts to determine if any other kids are sick. And then also would give us a chance to clean the school really thoroughly. So when I say short period of time, like 2 to 5 days, where we may have to shut a school down if we get a positive case. So I know that sounds like a lot, and it almost is overwhelming when you think about how you can do all those things, but we're working on that, and we're trying to figure out the best way to make that work in the fall. And that's some of the information you'll receive on Friday or Thursday this week, is just what I've described. What I want parents to know, I guess, on a parallel path is we're also working on our remote learning plan, and because we know that we'll have some students that can't come back. And so we'd want parents to really have some options in the fall. You know, sort of this in-person education, even though it looks a lot different. Or if a parent decides, you know what, I want to continue with remote learning, we would have that option as well. And we may have some teachers working on that option with parents, but we're going to need to know that early on so that we can plan for that. So sometime this summer, maybe mid-July, we'll be sending out a survey asking that question. You know, here's what our in-person program looks like. Here's what remote learning looks like, and please tell us what your preference is going to be, because in order to plan for having teachers to help with that, we're going to have to have some idea what the numbers will be. All of these things that I'm discussing are expensive. We received a little bit of money from the federal government through the CARES Act, but we're estimating that it may only cover about half of our total costs related to reopening. So we're obviously looking at our budgets and trying to figure out the best course of action. So I've said quite a bit, and I apologize. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but I would just stop there and see if folks have questions, comments, or feedback, things you think we should be thinking about as we plan this remote learning. And again, if possible, if you'd like to share something, obviously the chat is great, but we may have some people on the phone as well. So I'd much rather if you unmute yourself and tell us your name and what school you're from, and then obviously share your comment.
Hi, Rob. My name is David Lowenwater. You were talking about the increase in costs, and I'm just wondering if there are some places that you can make cost cuts to siphon that or move it laterally over to where the increased costs are going to be needed to be made up.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We actually have already done some of that. So fortunately, we did see some savings this spring. We saw some savings in the way of reduced budgets for utilities, because without having kids in the building, I mean, our utility costs were reduced. We also saw some reduction in transportation. Obviously, for the last 3 months, we haven't had any field trips. We haven't had any sports teams that are traveling to other cities. So we actually did see quite a bit of savings in some of those areas. And what we've done, which is allowed under state law with school finance, we've sort of shifted those funds into reserves. And we're trying to hold on to those as long as we can so that we can use those funds in the fall as needed. So, and we'll continue to do that throughout the fall, or throughout the spring and the summer, to try to cobble together some of those expenses.
Thank you.
Rob, we do have a couple of questions that were in the chat from the beginning of the meeting. It may be worth reading those out loud for those on the phone and addressing those.
Sure.
We have one from Jeannie B at the very beginning of the meeting.
Yep. Thank you. It said the option of a P instead of a letter grade, detrimental for applying for college. So yeah, so just to give everyone a little bit of background on this, if you have a high school student, then you probably kind of watched how this transpired. But if you don't have a high school student, then you probably don't know. But let me start at a broad level. Across the country, when we went to remote learning, we were not the only ones. The schools across the country did it. Across the country, a lot of schools, high schools specifically, they transferred all their grades to a pass-fail. And so it didn't matter what you got in the class or what you did on remote learning, as long as it was higher than a 60%, you got a pass. So you could have been doing, you know, A-level work, but you're still just going to get a pass. And the reason they did that was for simplicity, and because some kids are able to actually do stuff in remote learning and other kids can't. And so the pass-fail thing was tackled by a bunch of school districts. That's just how they did it. we explored that option here too, but we felt like it would be better to give kids the option to accept the grade, because we actually had some students that were progressing pretty well in remote learning. We had some students that actually did better in remote learning. And so we wanted to give kids the option to just take the grade, because when you get to high school, that grade becomes part of your GPA, and that's really important for obviously for lots of things, you know, after high school. So we actually are being very flexible, probably more flexible than other districts around the country. But this is something I talked with the other AA superintendents about, and it seems like we were all on the same page. Basically, what we're doing at high school is allowing kids to receive the grade that they earned, or if they're worried that that grade is going to be detrimental to their GPA because maybe they had an A, but after remote learning they had a C, then they can also take the pass option. And this gets a little confusing, but with a pass option, the grade is not figured into your GPA. So you still get credit for the class, but it doesn't impact your GPA. And so right now our students are really making those decisions. And so the question from Jeannie is, will the option for taking a P instead of a letter grade be detrimental for students applying for college? So great question. And we've actually received this question this week from a number of parents, and I apologize, we weren't clear on this, but what's great is that across the country, most districts are doing a pass-fail. And so it doesn't matter where a kid applies to college, that university is going to know that second semester of 2020, they're going to see a lot of pass-fail grades, because that's what most districts are doing. And so we've already gotten some word from the Montana university system, and I think this probably mirrors other states. The Montana university system has said they won't hold any kid accountable for a pass-fail during this COVID experience. So it's not going to be detrimental to take a pass, because that's what a lot of other high schools in the state are, in the country, are giving passes. Where I think it may be detrimental is to the GPA. So if I was a student and I had an A in the course, I'd probably want to leave the A rather than take the pass, because that A is going to help my GPA.
So we've got a couple more in the chat, and we've also got a hand raised from Darla. I'll let you determine if you want to go into the chat or get Darla to unmute.
Go ahead, Darla.
So, Rob, we talked earlier this year in the advisory meetings about the university and trying to match the schedule with MCPS.
Yes.
The university has decided that they're going to start earlier. Are we still on schedule to start at our regular time, or are we going to match them this year?
We have discussed that. And I discussed that actually with President Bodner a little bit, because I was trying to figure out what the rationale was. And I think their biggest rationale is, what they're worried about is that travel. And you saw it when we had new people coming into Montana, then all of a sudden we've got more cases. So I think what the university was worried about is that student travel between Thanksgiving and the holiday break. So that's why they moved it, because they only had 2 weeks between Thanksgiving and their holiday break. We would actually have to move 3 weeks if we were going to try to move it. And we didn't see the same concerns with travel. The other thing the university has said is that they're hoping that if they're out of school from Thanksgiving to, I don't know, January 15th, that they would avoid that high time for infection. But our nurse clearly reminded me right away. She said, you know, infection doesn't happen in Thanksgiving to January. Some of it does. But if you remember the pertussis outbreak a couple of years ago, that happened in March. So it's really hard to predict, you know, just by taking that time off, that you're going to avoid the infection rate. So we're not going to change our schedule at this point. It may become a board discussion, but we just didn't see the same rationale to change our calendar based on what the university did. And I don't disagree with what the university did. I think they made a sound decision based on their kids and their population, but I don't think it doesn't affect us the same way at K-12.
Okay, I think the next question in the chat is from Gabrielle Sather Olson.
Yes, thank you for that question. I glanced at that briefly. This is an important piece. So Gabriel is asking about an equity specialist. It's right now, it's not an individual position, but it is part of a job. So one of the things in my restructure was to have one person focused on our data. And I really believe that we can find a lot of inequities by just focusing on our data. That's one piece of it. So we will have a person in the federal programs position, and I say federal programs, but really that's Title I, Title VI, all of the various title programs that we have in our district. We will have an administrator in that position who is focused on equity, but they're focused on equity within our data. And what does it tell us, and how do our practices either help with the equity issue or make it worse? So right now, that's part of an administrative position. It's part of our federal programs director position. However, having said that, I think in the long run, my goal would be to have that person that's designated just for equity and diversity and non-discrimination. I think what's difficult right now is that when a person feels that they've that something has happened to them in the district that doesn't feel right, maybe it feels like discrimination, there's really no avenue for them to pursue that. And so what's happening is, you'll see some of that stuff on social media before we even know about it. So we've got to set up an avenue, and sometimes that is somebody in our district that is focused on those issues and can be that go-to person when somebody feels unsafe or feels like they need to talk about possible discrimination. So we don't have it yet, but that would be nice to have that in the future. Year-round schedule, yes. So that's another thing to consider. We've been talking about that as well. What we are going to do, unfortunately, you won't see that next year, but it's probably something that we could look at in the future. What we are going to do is start back in August with a more focused summer ramp-up program for students that really academically need that. And so what you'll see coming out in the next few weeks is a plan for all of our schools, all 9 elementary schools, all 3 middle schools. They're going to have a summer ramp-up program that's going to start the first part of August. And again, it's not for all students, but it's for a select number of students who really need that extra help. And it gives us a chance to really give them some extra attention. So the principals are going to message that to parents, and parents will be asked if they want to participate in that. And I hope that you do. If you're asked to participate, I hope that you will, because I think that's a way to start looking at that year-round schedule. Okay. I think we talked about the university schedule. Yes. So Beth brought up a concern about disinfectants. Beth, would you be willing to just talk through that a little bit, just in case you want to share anything more than what you put in the chat?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I had a lot of chaos going on in my background. Otherwise, I would have just spoken up and not sent a chat. No, I was really glad I have 2 kiddos. One is on their way out of Rattlesnake into Washington, and one is on their way out of Washington and into Hellgate. And you brought up hand washing, and that was great to hear, because I know that the CDC has really emphasized the proven effectiveness of hand washing at keeping us healthy, even sort of above cleaning and disinfecting. And so I think my question's kind of twofold. One, is there going to be kind of a specific hand washing protocol as a priority when schools start to open? And then my other question / comment is really on with some concerns about the misuse and the overuse of some disinfectants, which can be particularly harmful and linked to asthma triggers and other respiratory issues. And I do know that there are safer disinfectants available. The EPA has certified a handful of these with safer ingredients that are not only, safer, but also effective at fighting COVID. So I'm just wondering if that is being looked into at all, if it's an option for the district. And if not, also just making sure that that we're really following the safety, the safety warnings that are coming from manufacturers, and making sure that they're used in a safe setting, and that children in particular are never using them.
Yeah, great questions. We in March, we started to establish some hand washing protocol, and what we quickly found out is that we may not have enough sinks and restrooms available to really increase as much as we want to. So I think what we're going to have to do with hand washing is really set up a schedule so that students are given frequent breaks throughout the day, and that we're not overloading bathrooms, but setting up a schedule for hand washing. But yes, that would be the protocol around that, and the schedule is something that I know all of us are working on for the fall. It will be easier if we didn't have all the kids in there at the same time. Like, remember I said that maybe only 50% of the kids would start back, and we would sort of rotate, but we're going to have to figure out those protocols, because that continues to be something that seems really, really important. Regarding the cleaners, we have heard similar comments from other parents. We are investigating other options. And Beth, if you've got some ideas, just shoot me an email and I could share those with our supply people. What we've heard is, number one, it's very difficult to get some alternatives just based on the supply and demand right now. And we've also heard that they're very costly. So one of the things we chatted about, I just talked to my chief facilities guy this morning about this, but we can minimize risk of those cleaning supplies by, cleaning workspaces without kids in the room, making sure that we're not cleaning right before they walk back in the room. So if they go out for recess, wipe down the surfaces right away, and then by the time they get back for recess, hopefully everything would have dried. So I don't know, I'm not an expert on the cleaning supplies, but we do have people in our district that are experts. So if you've got some research or information you would like to share on that, I'd love to see that. So just send that to me and I'll make sure it gets to the right people.
Great, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Yep.
So Rob, it looks like 2 more questions in the chat and 2 raised hands, and then we'll probably have to close it out.
Oh, geez. I talk too long. You guys just need to shut me off. Turn me off. Let's see. Yes, families with multiple aged elementary kids. So I have to preface this because not everybody has the same, like I've got 2 kids and they have the same last name, but I know that's not always the case. So, but what we're going to try to do is set up a schedule by alphabet so that you could expect both your kids would be in school on the same day. Now, we know we're going to have to make some exceptions to that because some families, kids don't have the same last name. So we'll have to be able to accommodate that as well. But that would be our hope, is that all of your kids in your household would be attending school on the same day.
Thank you.
And a question in the chat about high school sports, as well as what we're basing our decisions on with regard to reopening.
Okay. I don't see the high school sports one.
Catherine asked, she's got students at Hellgate who are really looking forward to fall high school sports, and she's wondering what is going to happen. What's the likelihood of those sports?
What we've given our coaches permission to do is restart some of the summer activities with some specific precautions. So I know our coaches have already started some workouts, some outdoor workouts. They'll also do some indoor workouts, but there's a lot of precautions around that. Like, for example, screening kids when they come to the practice, or making sure they're have appropriate supplies for cleaning and those sorts of things. So that'll happen this summer. We have not gotten any word from the Montana High School Association, who governs high school sports as to whether or not the season is going to restart in a normal manner. And they have to make that call. They're the ones that actually shut the season down during the basketball tournament, if you recall that, in March, and they didn't restart the sports season. So we'll have to wait to hear from the Montana High School Association what they want to do with the fall sports. But yeah, that would be my hope, is that we would have some fall sports and other activities for students. And then let's see, the question about, help me find it, Hatton.
Elbow Lake was asking, what are we basing our opening of schools on in the fall? Is it cases in the community, trends, CDC, testing, etc.?
Yeah, so what I found out through all of this is, first of all, the permission has to come from the governor, and he's given permission at this point for schools to reopen. The next level of that has to come from the local health department, which makes sense, because they're really in the best place to help us make this decision. The local health department can track cases in the community. They can tell us if there is community spread. They can also investigate data. So what's amazing to me, and you probably have seen some of this in the newspaper or other research, they can actually, and this sounds gross, I'm sorry, but they can actually look at sewer data to see and predict if there's going to be a spike in cases. And I don't know how it works. Many of you are probably more knowledgeable related to that science, but we're using all of that to help us make these decisions. So what I'd like to do is be able to say to folks in the fall, we believe that it's safe to come back because the health department doesn't see community spread, and we've got no other word that there might be a soon to be spike in cases. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at, is to make sure that we open in a safe manner, but also that we're not creating more transmission in the community. All right. Okay. What else did I forget?
So we just have a question from Angela and then a question from Jennifer. Angela, why don't you go ahead and unmute your mic, and then you can ask your question.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Dr. Watson. So my question, I appreciate how hard this spring was for the teachers trying to figure out schedules and teaching and balancing parents and kids at home. I'm wondering if there is any kind of an opportunity to work with the university to bring in those education, sorry, I'm looking at my dog, the kids that are in the education program, students, the college students, to perhaps come into the classroom, work with the teachers on some level, a couple hours a week, to help bring our kiddos up to speed, and especially with math and reading. We didn't have a great experience. It was fine, it was good, but I just feel like a lot of ground was lost.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the reason that we are trying to do that August ramp up program, is to give our, and we're gonna, pay teachers obviously for their time in August, but to give some of our kids more exposures, especially for those kids that have fallen behind. So I understand it won't be for everybody, but we feel like that'll be some good option for some kids. That's a great suggestion about the extra help from the university. I wrote that down. One of the conversations I had a few weeks ago was with the education department, just to see what their fall looked like, and how that might look. And they explained to me that they're pretty nervous about having enough spots for all of their future teachers. So I think that's a great idea, to really bring some extra people into the classroom. And then we can also use a portion of our CARES Act money after school starts. We can use a portion to hire more help, which we will likely do. But we can also use a portion of that to hire more help in the classroom for teachers. So there's a couple of options there. What we found out is, good help, it really is difficult to find, but I think we have some options to really work with that. But that's a great idea about the UM department, and I will talk to them about that.
Okay, Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask your question too, please?
Hey there. First, thank you for this opportunity. And I want to dovetail a little bit off of what Angela talked about in terms of the remote learning. And I'm curious to know if Google Classroom will be the platform utilized by most teachers going forward. I'll have a sophomore at Hellgate. It was super tough in our household as well. But that in mind, going forward, I'm hopeful teachers will be given some support and enrichment opportunities, maybe to utilize video more than they did, at least in our experience, because that seems to be so effective, especially with high school students. And I think the university student suggestion's excellent, because being as techie as those kids are, that might be awesome support for our teachers. So that was basically my question.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we'll have some unique opportunities this summer for more training for our teachers. Several of our teachers sort of stumbled into this and did the best they could, but we understand that it was a stretch. And some of our teachers, this was really natural to them, and they'd already been doing a lot of this, but other teachers had not. So we do need to support our teachers more with training, and we're hoping to do a little bit of that this summer. With regards to Google Classroom, I believe that's the platform that we'll be using, but I do know that there's other platforms out there, but it seems to be that's the one that's easiest for us right now. What I have heard, and I believe this, is it's very difficult for parents to sort of track what kids are doing in Google Classroom, because Google Classroom is really set up for work between students and teachers. So unless you're standing over their shoulder, it's difficult to sort of track if they're doing it or not doing it in Google Classroom. That's been my perception. But on a related note, and maybe Hatton already put this in the chat, we have a parent survey going right now that we really want you to participate in, because your comments and suggestions on that survey will help us improve our remote learning plan going forward. So Hatton, I don't know if you've already put that in the chat or talked about that.
Please.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the chat. We're really happy that we sent out 2 surveys, one to our staff and one to our families, and we've got a great response rate. We'll probably be sending a reminder on Wednesday, but I'll make sure I drop it into the chat before we close this out.
Can that survey be, depending if you had children that had totally different, my kids had vastly different experiences with their remote learning, just from how accessible it was for them and the quality of it?
Yes, thanks for asking that, Andrea. There are a lot of general questions, and then there's a section where you can answer it, specifically for all of your students. And so it actually asks you to give a number. How many students do you have? And then it'll give you that many opportunities to answer specific questions about those students.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and to Teresa's question, we will make the survey results public. Actually we're partnering with U of M on the survey. So as soon as we feel like we have a good enough representative sample, then we'll be publishing the results. Ty has a question.
Hi, I'm a special ed teacher with MCPS, and I was just going to ask if you all would please consider giving teams a little bit of extra time before the beginning of the year. This coming year, we typically have 1 day with our paras before the school year starts, but given our need to look at safety plans and all, I'm asking that you consider giving us some additional days of collaboration, please.
So Ty, are you talking specifically extra time with your paraeducators and classified staff, or extra time with your teacher colleagues, or both?
I'm specifically asking for extra time with my paras. It's going to be difficult for our children with autism and our children who have aggressive behaviors to transition back. And we're going to need to be able to spend some time looking at safety plans in addition to academics and our scheduling. So I'm just asking that you consider giving us some additional time other than that one day that we typically get.
Sure. Thanks for that suggestion. I'm writing it down so I don't forget.
Okay, so Rob, we are at 5 o'clock. It looks like we do have one hand raised, and I wonder if you want to get that, and then we'll
Sure.
close it out.
Yeah.
Megan, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah. Hi. My name is Megan Glass. I have children in elementary school as well as middle school. And I did just want to echo what Andrea had said. Very vastly different experiences between expectations, standards, communication, and so forth. Just hoping that we can align those a little bit. Obviously, this was a very unprecedented time. But again, the experiences were so incredibly different.
And Megan, was that specifically between elementary and middle school? Is that where you're?
You know, I don't know if that was the reasoning for the difference.
Okay.
I couldn't say that for certain. Availability of teachers, availability of teaching methods. They were incredibly different. My fourth grader had somebody, his teacher, you know, had Zoom classes. They met regularly. There was always, I always received an answer. It was different on the other on the middle school level.
Okay.
And it again, this is a very, very unique situation. I think that we've had, you know, 3 months of school to experience this. We have another, you know, June, July, August to plan for what the fall looks like. I would just hope that that my middle school child would have more opportunity to interact with teachers, more availability of teachers to answer questions, more availability to get taught, less of the please read this and answer this question, write this paper. You know, he would email questions and not necessarily always get, you know, a response. It just was a very, very different experience. And again, I understand that everybody had unique situations, everything about this was just challenging, I think, for everyone. I think for the most part, people really pulled together and did what they could do. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that the experiences between the two schools were vastly different.
Okay, thank you. A request to just address Penelope's two questions, and hopefully I'm getting the right ones here. Would online learning be bound to standards, or have you considered more self-directed method? The reason that I would be a proponent of bounding the learning to standards is that eventually these students will be back in school. And so I don't know when that'll happen, but I would want us to be consistent on the standards. Always my goal, and this goes back to that equity statement that I talked about earlier, always my goal is it doesn't matter which school you're at. You should be receiving the same standards, curriculum standards, no matter what school you're at. So I believe, my opinion, we would still be bound to our curriculum standards under remote learning. And then what do teachers need in terms of support to adapt to the isolation? That has been very difficult. I won't tell you